They told me I'd be out for a few hours after the C-section, but I woke up too soon. My head was heavy, my arms numb, and the room felt distant, like I was underwater. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, but I could hear everything. My mother-in-law was standing near my bed. She didn't whisper. She didn't even try to hide what she said. If it's a girl, leave her. We only keep boys in this family. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed. And then my husband, my own husband, said something I'll never forget. Don't worry. I already signed the papers. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew it was about our baby. My baby, the child I carried for 9 months. I blacked out again. But when I opened my eyes later, I was holding her, my daughter, safe, warm, wrapped in pink. And that's when the nurse leaned in and said something that turned my world inside out. Your son recorded everything they said while you were unconscious. I grew up never knowing what a real family looked like. Bounced from one foster home to another, I learned early not to expect much from people. I kept my head down, did what I was told, and told myself that someday when I had a family of my own, things would be different, safe, loving, real. That dream began to feel possible when I met Rayanne. He was older, confident, charming. He listened like no one else ever had. I was 20, working nights at a diner, barely affording rent on a one-bedroom apartment. Rayanne would wait for me after every shift, sometimes with flowers, sometimes just with that smile that made me feel like I mattered. We married a year later. Looking back, I wish I had listened to the quiet voice in my head, the one that whispered warnings every time he snapped at a waitress or dismissed something I said. But when you grow up desperate for connection, even a controlling hand can feel like affection. I got pregnant with Zeke 3 months after the wedding. That was the first time I saw who Rayanne really was. He didn't want to hear about morning sickness. He didn't come to doctor appointments. When I cried over swollen ankles or back pain, he called me dramatic. But when Zeke was born, everything changed for a while. Rayanne seemed proud. He posted photos. He even called me his warrior. Then his mother moved in, Dahlia. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a cold stare. She said she was there to help. But within a week, she'd taken over the kitchen, changed how Zeke was fed, and told me I was holding him wrong. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Every word came coded in superiority, every glance a quiet judgment. Rayanne adored her. If I ever said anything, he'd say, "She knows what she's doing." She raised 3 boys. If I pushed harder, he'd go silent or disappear for a day. I stopped pushing. Over the years, I learned how to live quietly in my own house. I tiptoed around her. I made meals she liked. I gave up trying to have friends over. I stayed home while Rayanne and Dahlia attended events together. To them, I was just the vessel that brought in the next generation. Zeke became my whole world. He was gentle and curious, always asking questions, always watching. He'd sit with me while I folded laundry, helping me match socks. He noticed everything, even the things I tried to hide. When I found out I was pregnant again, I felt this flicker of hope I hadn't felt in years. Maybe this time things would be different. I wanted a girl. I never said it out loud, but I dreamed about her. I imagined doing her hair, reading her bedtime stories, showing her what love really looked like. I told Zeke he might be getting a sister. He grinned and asked if he could help pick out her name. But the moment Rayanne found out, his mood shifted. He didn't say much, but I could feel it. He stopped sleeping next to me. He spent more time at work. Dahlia became colder than usual. One night I heard them whispering in the kitchen. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the tone. Something wasn't right. Still, I tried to stay focused. I took my vitamins. I talked to the baby. I told her how loved she would be. I kept smiling for Zeke. I told myself that Rayanne was just stressed, that Dahlia would come around. I ignored the growing dread that clawed at me whenever I caught them looking at me with something colder than indifference, something close to contempt. By the time I was 8 months pregnant, I was exhausted. My body ached. Zeke was the only bright light in my day. He'd read to my belly, tell his baby sibling jokes, and sometimes lie next to me when I cried silently in bed. Then, one early morning, my water broke. The contractions came fast. Rayanne didn't even help me pack. Dahlia complained the whole drive to the hospital that I could have waited another week. At check-in, Rayan handed over papers I hadn't seen. The nurse looked confused, but said nothing. Zeke was supposed to stay with a neighbor, but he insisted on coming inside for just a minute. He said he forgot his drawing. I didn't know it then, but he slipped his old iPod into his hoodie pocket and followed us in. I was wheeled into surgery, overwhelmed and alone, praying for strength. I didn't know that what was about to happen would shatter everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me, and I had no idea that my 9-year-old son was about to save his sister's life. The moment I was wheeled into that cold operating room, I felt it. Something was wrong. The lights were too bright. The air felt too still. Rayan stood by the door, not at my side. He didn't hold my hand. He barely looked at me. Dahlia was behind the curtain, whispering to one of the nurses with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I felt exposed, alone, and increasingly afraid. A nurse asked if I had signed the consent forms. I blinked in confusion. I hadn't seen anything. Before I could answer, Rayan stepped forward and said, "Already taken care of." His tone was calm, casual, like it was nothing. The nurse hesitated, glanced at me, then nodded and walked away. They placed the mask over my face to begin the anesthesia. My heart was racing. Something inside me told me to fight it, to stay awake, but I was tired, so tired. I closed my eyes, but I didn't fall all the way under. I was somewhere in between, half conscious, drifting. My limbs wouldn't move, my voice wouldn't come out, but I could hear. That was when I heard Dahlia's voice. "If it's a girl, leave her," she said clearly, as if she were discussing the weather. "We only keep boys in this family." The words sliced through the fog in my head like glass. My body remained still, but inside, I was screaming. I tried to open my eyes. I tried to sit up. Nothing worked. Then Rayan's voice followed. "Don't worry," he said. "I already signed the papers." My thoughts were racing. Papers? Leave her? What were they planning? My chest burned with panic, but I was trapped in my own body. I wanted to scream his name, to demand an explanation, to beg someone to help me. But I was paralyzed, forced to listen. "I told you she wanted a girl," Dahlia said. "She's weak. Girls make women soft. You start giving them choices and they think they matter." Rayan laughed. "She'll never know. She's too drugged. Just have them say there were complications." My mind couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. This was my husband, the man I'd loved, lived with, trusted. This was the woman who had lived in my home, held my son, shared my table. They were planning to discard my child, my daughter. Somewhere in the hallway, I thought I heard a shuffle, a small sound like fabric brushing against tile. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Later, I'd realize it was the sound of Zeke hiding just outside the operating room, clutching his iPod in his sweatshirt pocket. He hadn't gone home like they told him. He had followed. He had heard everything. And he had pressed record. Back in the delivery room, the surgery began. I couldn't feel pain, but I felt pressure. My ears still worked. Every sound around me felt magnified. I heard Dahlia say, "If it's a boy, I'll call my sister right away. She'll be thrilled." I heard Rayan say, "We'll just say she never made it." There was no mention of me, no concern for whether I lived or died. They didn't speak like I was a person. I was a body, a barrier, a problem to get around. One of the nurses asked about the baby's name. Rayan said, "No name. We'll decide later." Another nurse questioned the discharge plan. Rayan said it was already arranged, but one nurse didn't stay quiet. Her name was Maya. I didn't know that yet, but I would never forget her. She kept asking questions. She didn't accept vague answers. When Rayan got frustrated, she calmly walked away. That's when she passed Zeke in the hallway. She saw the iPod in his hand. He told her he had something important. She didn't brush him off. She listened. Zeke played the recording for her, right there in the hallway with his small hands shaking. She didn't panic. She didn't cause a scene. She put her hand gently on his shoulder and said, "You did good, sweetheart." Then she turned and walked straight to the charge nurse. Inside the OR, I was starting to fade. I felt my heart slowing. I heard muffled voices. One of the doctors said I was losing blood. Someone else said they were increasing the meds. I wasn't sure if I would wake up again. I remember praying, not for myself, but for my baby. Please let her be safe. Please let someone see what they're trying to do. Somewhere in the building, my son was saving her. He didn't cry, he didn't run. He recorded every word they said, and he handed it to the only person who was willing to stop pretending nothing was wrong. When I finally opened my eyes again, the room was dim, quiet, and sterile. The first thing I noticed was the weight in my arms. I looked down and saw her. She was bundled tightly in a soft pink blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling against mine. She had a full head of dark hair and the softest lips I had ever seen. My daughter. She was alive. She was with me. Tears filled my eyes before I could speak. I didn't understand what had happened yet, only that she was here, safe, breathing, real. Then I noticed the nurse standing next to me. She wasn't charting or rushing away like the others. She was watching me closely, her expression serious but kind. She leaned in, speaking quietly so only I could hear. "Your son recorded everything," she said. "He caught all of it, what they said while you were under." I stared at her, trying to process what she meant. Then the memories came rushing back like a dam breaking. Dahlia's voice, Rayan's words, the paperwork. My chest tightened, and I instinctively held my daughter closer, terrified they would still try to take her from me. The nurse's voice was calm and steady. "You're safe now. She's safe, but we need your help to protect her." I blinked fast, fighting the dizziness in my head. "What do you mean?" "My name is Maya. I'm the lead nurse on this floor," she said. "Your son came to me during surgery. He was hiding in the hallway with an iPod. He recorded a conversation between your husband and his mother. It's disturbing, and it's all on file." I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that Zeke had done that my 9-year-old had understood what I couldn't even voice, that he had taken action when I was completely helpless. Maya continued, "We've reviewed the audio. The hospital administrator has heard it. It's enough for us to initiate emergency safeguarding measures, but I need to know you're willing to cooperate." I nodded immediately. "Yes, anything. We've isolated your husband and his mother from the floor. They don't know we're acting on anything yet. We told them you were still sedated and that the baby was under observation. We're giving you a chance to act before they can." Maya handed me a clipboard with a short document. "This is a formal statement that gives us permission to place a protective hold on your daughter and initiate contact with Child Protection Services. It also gives you full medical decision-making authority without spousal interference." My hands shook as I took the pen. Signing it felt surreal. Just hours earlier, I was unconscious, nearly erased from my own life. Now I was claiming it back with a signature. Maya took the form and gave me a reassuring nod. "You just gave her a future." I asked to see Zeke. A few minutes later, he walked in with another nurse. His face lit up when he saw me awake, but his eyes quickly shifted to the baby in my arms. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice trembling. "Did they try to take her?" I shook my head and opened my arm to him. He climbed up onto the bed carefully, his small body curling against my side. "She's perfect," I whispered, "and she's here because of you." He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her, wide-eyed and protective. Then he whispered, "I heard them." I didn't know what to do, but I remembered you said we always protect the people we love. "You did everything right," I said, pressing my lips to his forehead. "You saved your sister." Outside the room, Maya and the administrators began the process. Hospital security was briefed. Social services were contacted. Rayan and Dahlia were still in the waiting area, unaware that their words had been captured by the child they underestimated. I watched through the small glass window in the door as a hospital administrator approached them. Dahlia crossed her arms, clearly annoyed. Rayan looked impatient. A few minutes later, they were both escorted out of the building by security. No yelling, no scene, just consequences. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still so much ahead of me. Legal battles, custody hearings, a future without the man I thought I'd spend my life with. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. I looked down at my daughter and then at my son. I would never let anyone threaten them again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. Rayan and Dahlia didn't realize what had hit them until it was too late. They sat stiffly in the hospital's family waiting room, flipping through outdated magazines, their expressions calm calculated. Rayan kept glancing at his watch. Dahlia's mouth moved with quiet disapproval each time a nurse passed by without giving her an update. They had no idea their plan had unraveled. No idea that a nurse, a child, and a mother who refused to stay silent had turned the story around. Inside my room, Maya stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The administrator, a woman named Claire, stood just behind her with a folder in hand. Both of them had listened to the audio Zeke recorded. I didn't need to hear it again. I remembered every word, but hearing that it was real, documented, undeniable, that gave me power. Claire nodded at me. "We're ready. Do you want to stay in the room or be moved somewhere more private?" "I'm not hiding," I said. "Not anymore." Zeke sat in the chair beside my bed, one hand on his sister's tiny foot. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask to leave. He wanted to see this through. Maya placed a hand gently on his shoulder and looked at me. "We're with you." A few minutes later, hospital security escorted Rayan and Dahlia to a private conference room, claiming there had been a concern about insurance documents. Claire and Maya met them there. The recording was played without warning. Rayan's voice came through clearly. "Don't worry, I already signed the papers," followed by Dahlia's cold command. "If it's a girl, leave her. We only keep boys." Claire paused the audio. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rayan tried to recover first. "That was taken out of context." "It wasn't," Claire replied. "It's over 5 minutes long. It includes explicit intent to abandon a newborn. It includes your acknowledgement of falsified documentation. It includes your mother's involvement." Dahlia stood up. "I was joking." That nurse misunderstood. "Where is my granddaughter?" "She's not your concern anymore," Claire said. "You are both being reported to Child Protective Services and the authorities for attempted abandonment and coercion. You will not be allowed near the child or her mother pending investigation." Rayan raised his voice. "You can't do this. I'm her husband. We have rights." Maya stepped forward. "You had rights until you tried to erase your own child before she took her first breath. You forfeited them." Security was called back in. Dahlia shouted all the way down the hall. Rayan didn't look back once. Later, I was told the hospital had launched an internal inquiry, and the forms Rayan signed were found to have forged sections. Dahlia had pressured one of the junior staff into fast-tracking paperwork that had no legal standing. They had planned everything down to my recovery, hoping I'd wake up to an empty crib and no answers. But the truth was stronger than their lies. Back in my room, I finally let myself breathe. I held my daughter close, tracing the curve of her cheek. Zeke leaned in, whispering, "She's really staying, right?" "She's ours," I said. "No one's taking her away." The next few days were a blur of visits from social workers, legal paperwork, and long conversations with Maya and Claire. The hospital offered legal assistance. The police opened an investigation. A temporary restraining order was granted within 24 hours. I didn't have to see Rayan or Dahlia again. The recording Zeke made was submitted as evidence. It became the foundation of every legal move that followed. The judge who reviewed it said in the hearing transcript that it was one of the clearest examples of premeditated emotional abuse and child abandonment she had ever heard. Zeke was asked if he understood what he had done. He nodded and said, "I just knew it was wrong, and I knew my mom wouldn't be able to speak." That's who he was, a child who saw something terrible and refused to look away, a child who stood between his sister and the people who were supposed to love her. He never doubted his instincts, even when the people around him were pretending everything was normal. That night, after the chaos had started to quiet, I sat in the hospital bed with both of them, Zeke on one side, my daughter asleep on my chest. The hallway lights were dim. The door was shut. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know how I'd afford a lawyer or where we'd live once I was discharged, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We were going to be okay, because truth had a voice. And this time, it came from the smallest, bravest person in the room. After the hospital, I didn't go home. I couldn't. That house had been mine in name only. Every wall echoed with their voices, every room filled with the weight of silence I had lived with for too long. Instead, I was discharged into a women's support shelter with my 2 children and a fresh start waiting outside the walls that once held me captive. The transition was hard. I had nothing but a diaper bag, a few changes of clothes, and a folder filled with legal forms. No car, no job, no savings, but I had them, my son and my daughter. I had the truth, and I had the courage that came from surviving something meant to destroy me. Within a week, a local nonprofit stepped in to help. Maya, the nurse who had never left my side, connected me with legal aid. A pro bono attorney took my case and filed for full custody and an emergency protection order. The court didn't hesitate. The recording spoke for itself. Rayen never even showed up to the hearing. Dahlia submitted a written denial calling it all a misunderstanding, but the judge didn't buy it. Zeke testified in chambers with a child advocate beside him. I worried it would be too much, but when he came out of the room, he looked lighter, like something had lifted off his chest. Later, the judge told me he had spoken clearly and calmly, describing what he heard, what he saw, and what he felt. He told her, "I didn't want to lose my sister. I didn't want her to be alone like Mom was." That sentence became the heart of my case. 3 months later, I was granted sole custody of both children. Rayen was stripped of parental rights. Dahlia was barred from any contact. I didn't celebrate with champagne or confetti. I sat on the floor of our tiny new apartment and cried, not because I was sad, because I finally felt free. Zeke started therapy, paid for through the same nonprofit that had housed us. He began to smile more. He joined a kids' coding class at the community center and made his first real friend. He still checks on me at night, sometimes standing quietly in the doorway just to make sure I'm breathing, but he's healing. Slowly, honestly, beautifully. As for my daughter, I named her Hope, because that's what she gave me. She is calm and strong, with eyes that search my face like she's always trying to understand more than her age should allow. She wakes up with soft cries that melt into my chest the moment I hold her. I see pieces of Zeke in her already, alert, thoughtful, steady. Every time I look at her, I remember what could have happened, and I remember what didn't. Because a 9-year-old boy found his voice when I couldn't use mine. Because a nurse broke the silence that too many others accept. Because I stopped waiting for someone to save me and chose to fight instead. I started sharing my story in small women's groups. At first, I was terrified. My voice shook, my palms sweated. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how many women carry similar wounds. They didn't all have a Dahlia or a Rayen, but they knew the silence. They knew what it meant to swallow fear every day. Eventually, I was invited to speak at a statewide domestic awareness panel. Maya was in the audience. She came up to me afterward, hugged me tightly, and said, "You were never invisible. They just didn't want to see you, but now the world does. I'm not the same woman I was before that hospital room. I'm not scared anymore. I don't ask permission to exist. I don't shrink myself to fit inside someone else's comfort. I walk forward every day, not perfectly, but purposefully. I hold my children like they're sacred, because they are. And every time someone asks me how I made it through, I say this: they tried to silence me. They tried to take her. They thought I would sleep through the moment they erased us. But my son pressed record, and we pressed forward, together. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, anger, hope, strength, then let it live beyond this screen. Like the video, if you believe in the power of a voice, even when it comes from a child, share it with someone who needs to hear that silence doesn't have to be the end of the story. Comment below, tell me what this made you feel, or share your own story. You never know who it might help. And subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and never sugar-coated. Thank you for being here, for listening, for seeing us. This isn't just a story. This is proof that truth finds a way.